Welcome to the world famous Bitcoin Original Gangster, the show that takes no shit when it comes to SegWit. On this show, we'll be defending Bitcoin gangster style and exposing the shit in shitcoins. The idea of this show is that you ask us your questions on crypto and we'll tell you all that we know. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way. All the opinions that you hear on this show are opinion and must only ever be taken as opinion. They are never to be taken as any form of advice, family, financial, sexual or otherwise. And on that note, let's rock and roll.
Sartoshi.
Vesa, how are we?
I'm good, mate. That was a bit of a fucking weird one. Sorry for the noise. My computer just went completely AWOL with not only Twitter, but Facebook as well. It's been fucking acting up the whole of the morning, so that was weird.
There we go. Yeah, I sometimes get that in, like just on my desktop. It will just kind of like go, well, not working, but everything's fine on the app.
Right.
There we go.
So position the piece a little better. Background.
Very nice. Is that one of your latest creations?
It's not the latest, but it's something that keeps being eternally true. And I thought, because I thought for a little bit of what it is that I truly have to contribute to the space and what I would have to contribute to this conversation. And it's a certain kind of rabbit hole altogether that defines my whole life. so that's what the piece is about. It's called Red Eye. And it's about the rabbit hole that we go through, or the various different rabbit holes that we go through in life, whether it be about money or religion or the fucking matrix or whatever it is. So that's what that is about. So
very good. And do you? It's fairly abstract. Do you sort of have to explain your pieces to people when they're looking at them?
Sometimes, quite often. I mean, I try and. Are we recording this already, or how are we going to do this? Should we just save it for tape?
It's recording already, mate. I can just edit it like as and when.
Oh, okay. Are you not going to do any like intro or things like that, or are you going to do them like afterwards, or?
It's already pre-recorded. Just press a button.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, do you mind? Because I was starting to explain it basically just to you, so I'd probably phrase it a little different. Can we start like all over?
Yeah, sure.
And go into the thing slightly less spontaneously. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable, mate, if that's all right with you.
Yeah. Do you want to give yourself a countdown?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want me
3, 2, 1, go.
There we go. Right. Well, nice to meet you, Vesa. Welcome to Bitcoin Original Gangster.
Well, it's an honor, mate. I mean, that's quite a title to have. I'm not sure if I'm really someone who qualifies as the original gangsters. I've met a bunch of them who've been in crypto far longer than I have. But I suppose I got into the monetary sort of weirdness trenches already back in 2006. I think I posted on my Facebook feed the Zeitgeist documentary, and it took a while. It might have been even a couple of days before I actually had the courage to press send, because somehow I didn't quite understand what was going on, but I wanted to do it, and it was the right thing to do, was to post that thing at the time. And it was that matrix moment of the blue pill or the red pill type of thing. But I wasn't unaware of that having consequences if and when I post that thing online. So I do remember.
When was this?
2006.
Oh, right. Wow.
So I did. That's some while ago now, I suppose. So from a certain perspective, I've been in crypto longer than a lot of crypto has been in existence in this form that we know.
So Bitcoin was created in, what was it, 2008 was when the paper was released? Were you looking at other sort of like, encryption keys and stuff prior to that?
No, not really. I mean, I came into it fairly fresh, and it was those two documentaries at the same time. It was the Zeitgeist documentary and another one called The Corporation. And
I've seen that one. Yeah, I've seen The Corporation.
And that was like, I come from a fairly commercial-oriented family, and I went to a very left-wing art school, and sort of then did my sort of matrix type of thing, and I studied in university. I came across this dude called Ken Wilber, and he has this whole thing called the integral theory, and he studied all the different world religions and various political inclinations, and he basically made this whole human map of what came to be known as integral thinking, where you can find yourself sort of politically, religiously, and crudely put, let's say in the Abrahamic religions over here, we have a tradition currently in our religions that is that for you as an individual, it's meant to make you sort of grow up to a relative degree, but then there's no tradition of awakening like you have in the East. And this is very crudely put. So some of you who might be clued up to this don't don't come after me. I'm trying to do a good job with it. So, but essentially, like here, if you're in the Abrahamic religions, you can't really graduate. You can't really become one with the Godhead. There's not that. There's always intermediaries above your head who sort of rule you conveniently. And in the East, vice versa, you don't really have a tradition of growing up. So you might have the tradition of awakening to the Godhead, but you still, like in your day-to-day activities, you basically behave like a child. So he was the one who put those kinds of things together for me and helped me start to think more in a holistic way, I suppose, altogether. And I've always been really drawn to these vast concepts and try and make sense of them. And yeah.
And so what's your did that lead you onto the discovery of Bitcoin? How did you end up in cryptocurrency?
Long story, very short. I I published because after seeing the zeitgeist and realizing how the monetary system worked, I realized that there's no documentary like that in the Finnish language, and that's certainly not in the public lexicon, was how money works. And the more I started digging into it and asking people who worked in commercial banking, who were notable people in the field, and started digging into it further and further, no one was giving me any satisfactory answers. And it put me in a very uncomfortable space altogether, because it's like all of a sudden you're sitting on this very, very influential, massive structure that is guiding almost everyone's lives, but almost no one knows how it actually functions. And I'm sure you've gone through this whole fucking propulsion machine yourself.
Oh, yeah, it's laughable.
And then you go, well, this is weird. And then I've been very sort of truth oriented always. It's not about, if sometimes my political like, let's say, ideas have leaned more to the left or whatever, that's because at the time I thought that was the truth of things, and then I might have gotten educated a little bit to come more to the center, or go a little bit more to the right in some ideas, and because it's not really about group legions, or it's always for me about what is the truth of the matter, and how all encompassing is it, and is there new layers upon layers that can be discovered on this thing. And that's really the guidepost for me. So that leads you on a weird journey, and sometimes it leaves you without friends as well.
Yeah. Well, people who were your friends, kind of like, you can often find yourself being divided.
Very much. I mean, like for example, like this is the prime example that happened today. I've got a person who I know who I considered a friend, and I'm not going to name any names, but sort of attacked me yesterday online with this very sort of uppity tone about this one art piece that I've done that has all of these influencer signatures on them. And famously,
is that the one you did at CC Forum?
Yeah, that was their part. It actually started from World CryptoCon already in 2018. This whole process, and it's a long story, but essentially has about 50 major influencer signatures, and it's trying to gather $1 million for charity for this women's center in Houston.
Oh, amazing!
And this person just got an FYI. By the way, your art piece is a sausage fest. There's almost no women in there. And I said, well, there's actually 8 or 9 women and 50 names altogether, and it's not by any oppression or design like that. I mean, the whole thing is for women, for this women's shelter, and it has influencers, but I can't do anything about the actual divide. That in crypto you probably have 9 dudes to 1 lady, pretty much, and even though we have a bunch of very influential ladies. I don't, first of all, know them all, and I've tried to ask every single one that I realized that who would want to support the cause and be a part of it, and that kind of thing. So, but she still saw me as a sexist pig, and even and those signatures that I had asked from certain ladies weren't good enough for her. And you know,
She's the
there
one
was
with the
this whole
problem, though, not you.
well, that's exactly like even though she attacked me, I tried to kind of like put these arguments into like, listen here, the big picture is that we're trying to get $1 million into this charity. I've already have these names, and I'm about to ask more, and I'm happy to get more suggestions on who those people would be who would be put on this whole thing. But look at it from the charity point of view. Who are those people who can actually add value with their signature enough that someone would be willing to put $1 million into an art piece?
I think she just
And for
sounds
that,
jealous, mate, to be honest. That's all it is.
well, she did want her name there, and as I didn't directly immediately ask her, then obviously this is the kind of thing that goes in there. But I wanted to have this conversation first because she sort of directly attacked me, and then after that, none of the arguments made any sense, and everything that I said was shitty. And then she tried to boss me around to not participate in the conversation that
Yeah,
she started
political
by arguing
agendas,
back my
mate.
point. And then I was blocked and an asshole. And I'm
Mate,
going like,
that's called emotional abuse.
yeah, right. That's how I fucking felt. And I'm not like, here's an insight actually into crypto that is a psychology one that I think might be useful for some people. And because most people in crypto are here for freedom. And I'm a trained hypnotherapist. I got educated in neurolinguistic programming, NLP.
Wow.
And one of the coolest terms that I learned in NLP was this, oh shit, I just slipped my mind. Counter responder or some polarity responder. Yeah, that's it. So it's essentially 10% of the world's population are people that if someone tells you to do something, they automatically by default want to do the other thing. And I
Yeah.
find that there's quite a bunch of us, I'm definitely one of them, who are in crypto. And some of the things, because essentially it's a desire for freedom, but if someone tells you, hey, don't do that thing, and then that's automatically what you do. Again, if you're being controlled by your neurology and your default settings. So it's sort of optimal to have a bunch of tools in your box in order for you to kind of adjust the parameters every time something comes about, you know?
But you can, I mean, again, it's also a case of choosing your attitude, as in like not you personally, but like other people choosing theirs, you know, and you recognizing the attitude that they've chosen for themselves, and you can pigeonhole them. You know, if they come to you with a negative response that's relatively, you know, destructive, you know, just know that they're going to destroy themselves in the end. Just stay away from them.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the case. And I kind of thought about it also from that point of view, that this is probably quite a tumultuous time for a lot of people. And like for me, being quarantined is just my normal lifestyle as an artist. So this doesn't like the only
I'm the
thing
same, yeah.
really the only influence is that I can't go to the gym and sauna, which sucks, but you know, this is not too different. So
First world
I'm all right.
problems.
Right.
Oh, I can't go to the gym and the sauna. Oh.
But that is my like most of my like social interactions. If I'm not going into crypto meetups or conferences, that's pretty much it. It's me and my lady and the dog over here, and that's how things roll. How
Right.
you? So you're the same. You pretty much work from home then, yeah?
Yeah. So I run my own business, and again, it doesn't really involve meeting too many people. I mean, you know, the only time I have a reason to go out is if there's a problem. But if I'm good at my job, you know, problems are few and far between. So,
Right.
you know, it's most people would probably describe the setup that I've got as quite cushy, and you know, I would say that I would have to agree with them. You know, but on my voyage of mental health discovery, I've actually realised that interaction with people is very important because it engages the hippocampus in your mind, which is basically responsible for keeping you happy. You know, so if that's dulled in any way through non-use of creativity and initiative, you can actually become quite depressed.
It's yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just it's quite hard times altogether for a certain reason, like especially for my my point of view, as I'm sure it is for everyone, but for me particularly, because the way that I make sense of things, that I'm trying to find these integral angles. And lately, this whole thing, and especially with the past couple of days and altogether, like the past few years online watching people, is that there's this one sentence that keeps rattling around in my brain, which is that most people don't have ideas; ideas have them. And
Yeah.
there's like so ideological possession is something that Dr. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about. And I started through him going into totalitarian systems and looking far more in depth into communism and socialism, capitalism, going through all the sort of isms and different kinds of varieties that people tend to believe. And I studied religions before, as I mentioned, in my early 20s. I got into Ken Wilber, and I went through like both the East and the West, and the ones that ascend and descend, and all of that kind of stuff. And I just find myself in a certain sense more and more isolated from people, because they tend to pick a group and go into one thing really deep and dig their heels, and then that's it. And like I'm trying to look at it from, okay, so here's this part of the truth and this part of from their angle, and also this, and I don't, but that doesn't take into consideration this. And if I criticize someone's point of view, saying, well, that's not really all there is to it from my point of view, then I tend to get into conflict-like situations, and that's not my prerogative. Is to try and figure out truth, and have fruitful conversations that might help push things forward. And in that sense, I'm really a good faith actor. I don't go into situations trying to trip people up. I don't try and make myself more right than anyone else is. I'm simply trying to figure shit out and have relationships that are meaningful, in a sense that I don't have to drop out and not be myself anymore, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. I'm trying to find. There's a great quote by somebody that says, "Never argue with stupid people." Are you familiar? Are you familiar with this one?
There's a couple, I think. Which one in particular are you?
Oh, here we go. I've just got it. I'll just bring it up. Never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. Mark Twain.
That's the main one. Yeah, I've heard it before, but sometimes I'm dumb enough to not take that advice. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, if these people are people that you've built relationships with, and you have an expectation of, for that expectation, that you have to suddenly be smashed, like when you realise that they are actually either evil. Yeah, I mean, let's take for example, abusive partners in relationships. Do you know what I mean? You particularly for women who are going out with sort of like larger, more muscular guys in compared to their physique. Yeah, the guy might be showing them attention and love for maybe 2-3 years, and then they can just turn on a dime. And that's what can happen with friends, and it's really surprising. But it's then you have to make the decision for yourself. Is hanging around with this person benefiting me, or is it actually having a negative impact on me? Or do I just simply want to contain the relationship that we have in the circumstances that it's been built in, and therefore never touch on other topics like politics, religion, economics, or whatever it is you disagree. And you can set boundaries, and say, well, look, I enjoy this person, to go to the football match with, but I don't enjoy talking to them about religion or politics. So just leave it off the table.
But that's, the unfortunate part, I suppose, is that one of the most fascinating things to talk about is religion and politics. But maybe there's this whole thing is like where we got screwed a little bit along the way, is that there was someone again, I think it's like this old sort of folklore wisdom is that you shouldn't talk about religion, politics, and money or something like that. But because we haven't talked about them for such a long time, we forgot how to talk about them, or how to have an etiquette about talking about them. And now we're sort of all very much engaged with these topics online and on Twitter and whatever, but we don't have much of consideration to this, so it became this whole tug of war type of thing. And maybe there could be a sort of middle way, is to have some sort of a respectful conversation and learn how to disagree with one another without hating or shutting them up, just because you have a different kind of point of view. And this is definitely become something that is a part of the modern left, is that they're very sort of shut downy in a certain sense, and it's the cancel culture and all of these kinds of things. Even though luckily I think the tide is turning on that, and people have become quite like have had enough of it, really. There's this almost like this Stasi like sort of atmosphere where you step out and say one wrong thing to the politically correct machine, and then all of a sudden you're thrown out of all good society, so to speak. And I detest that type
Well, you
of
know,
mentality.
the way I look at it is that if you are having a discussion with someone or a debate or something like that, you are either discussing matters of fact and someone's right and someone's wrong, and you just have to go and find out, or you are discussing matters of opinion, in which case you can just simply agree to disagree because it's an opinion. That's it.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, I read all the articles that you sent me, and I know your inclinations in crypto go to BSV, and
Just Bitcoin, mate.
well, for the sake of the conversation, it might be good for us to like have it. Well, I'd be willing to try and have a conversation about what my point of view to that is, if I have something to contribute to what that conversation in general looks like to me.
Yeah, mate,
And
let's do it. Well, can you tell everyone your story as to how you found crypto and how long you've been in it and stuff?
yeah, sure. I mean, it was that documentary film, first saw in Zeitgeist and the Corporation, and then it led me to producing with some friends a documentary film called Ayan Henki, which is the
Oh, did you? You
Finnish.
actually produced something? Oh, this is awesome.
The yeah, it was 2 hours, what, something like 2.5 hour documentary on the monetary system. We didn't
Oh,
go into the conspiracy realms. We didn't go to any of the towers or religions or anything like that. We just said, hey, listen, this is the monetary system, the evolution of money. Here's people like the economic hitman and those kinds of things. And then we introduced the work of Jacques Fresco, the Venus Project dude. We went to interview him in Stockholm as he was there. And Finland's a very small nation. It's only about 5 million people. So we got something like 300,000 downloads to this independent documentary. Like, I basically put my production company money into it for a year, and we never made a penny from it. And a whole bunch of people in Finland learned about the monetary system through that film, because, you know, if you think of through osmosis, that most people who saw it, they had some sort of an opinion on it and probably put them forward to their family and so forth. And at the same time I started making art, I jumped out of documentary films and music videos and things like that, and I started making contemporary art through this body painting process in 2008. And this transition, and got ill and went to the hospital. All sorts of things happened, but I found myself, and probably because of a bunch of other things that I've talked about that are kind of taboo, whether it's about psychedelics or money or religion or these kinds of things. I found myself in Finland in a position where the sort of official doors for the majority of things were closed to me. I wasn't able to get into any of the sort of circles where anything gets funded or anything goes into areas of prestige or perceived prestige. And I was sort of ghosted by a whole country. And this was confirmed even further when I body painted this Pakistani actress called Veena Malik, who's Pakistani and Muslim. And we made these 6 art pieces that commented upon the common origin of all spirituality across the world, with this philosophy of Ken Wilber, the integral thinking. And even though it was controversial in its sort of origin settings, is that you have a Muslim woman who's only in body paint. Once people saw those pieces, even in Pakistan, they thought, oh, well, this is not actually what we thought they were. And we reached a lot of people. Some estimates, like even in legacy media alone, would be about 300 million people. But the media wasn't really interested in the substance of the art pieces. They just came to see if it was a car crash, if it's something that could really be bad, or if it's not. And they determined it's not a car crash. So they didn't think it was actually worth reporting what it really was. They just went, oh, it wasn't a car crash. And they went. So that taught me a lot about the state of things. And then eventually...
Is art your full-time? Is this what you do full-time? Is this your career?
Yeah, creative efforts have been my full-time work for ever since I was 20. It's about 20 years now altogether,
Oh, wow.
whether it's my own production company or things like that. And eventually I had to leave the country. So me and my lady, we packed up our dog in our car and we drove through 7 countries to come to London and start all over. And let's see if things work out here. And it was a couple of really, really difficult years. Nothing was going forward. I couldn't get film jobs. I couldn't get more than sporadic sort of photography jobs, and here and there an art piece sold, but whatever. But that sucked fucking hard. And then I went for a coffee with a friend of mine who came out of the crypto investor closet.
What year was this?
This is about 3 years ago now.
Oh, right, okay.
And
Fairly recent then, really.
Yeah. And then he said that, you know, he's been looking online for an art piece for his. By the way, these weird noises is my boxer dog sleeping next to me. So, hey boy, sorry, ruining the podcast. So yeah, so basically he said he'd been looking for an art piece for his office about his now world, which has been crypto for over a year, and he couldn't find anything that was of quality and taste for him, his liking. And he said that, hey, Vesa, I really know that you're quite passionate about this monetary system thing, so you might want to look into crypto where it really is now and how it is. And he taught me how to open my first wallet, and he recommended Bitcoin and Ripple were the first 2 coins that I got recommended to check out, as those were the ones for him that had done something. And yeah, it was right at the ramp of going up for the price, and I benefited really from none of that. But as soon as I this is only like 8 or 9 days in, that I already had a couple of art pieces produced and artforcrypto.com registered, and
Brilliant.
And then opportunities started coming in, like we're writing for News BTC, and Mo Levin offered me a place to go and exhibit in Miami for the North American Bitcoin Conference, right at the height of everything. And the world seemed to open up. The crypto sort of realized what I'd done before, and what kind of quality, I suppose, I brought with the whole art expression, but not only with the worldview. I mean, I felt at home immediately. And from there on, I've been pretty much all in. I fired the galleries that represented me, and it's just crypto now, essentially.
Brilliant. So you've done artworks for News BTC and other galleries and stuff.
No, for News BTC, I write about creativity and crypto art altogether. I mean, I have a mutual understanding deal with them that they don't really expect anything. They don't pay me, I don't pay them, and I have to mark my articles as sponsored, and they have their banner on my website, and I write what I want when I want, which is a pretty sweet deal altogether, in that sort of a sense that I get to publish what it is that I'm doing onto the platform like that, because my social media following isn't really personally that's sizable, even though which is sort of something that I keep contemplating, which is certainly quite weird, because I've done many nationwide or international big different campaigns and notable projects, and still my social media following always keeps being super small, and it's somewhat embarrassing even, but you know, what can you do? There's always ways around things. So,
well, I mean, the smaller it is, the more potential it's got. You know, you should be excited about
that. Yeah. So, but yeah, altogether now in crypto, I do these art pieces, both physical and digital, and then like I said, write for News BTC. I do keynotes and performances, and sort of altogether try and employ all the different kinds of faculties or sort of skills that I have in order to go against. Well, not even against, but it's more like try and help the whole of the monetary system evolve, because And if we get into the sort of more nitty gritty about crypto and the insider things of what's going on over here, it frustrates me sometimes, even though I understand that it's necessary that we determine of what is valuable and what is not, and what's a scam and what is not, and those kinds of things. I'm sort of, because the banking system, the traditional one, and as we now know, the 6 trillion printer is going, and whatever, all the things that leads into, that's really the one that I want to see some changes happen to. And crypto itself, even just the main forks of Bitcoin, can be quite volatile about one another sometimes, and I'm going like, well, okay, sort of in between. But I get it. It's really important, because if it, like, for example, if I listen to you, I listen to what you write, I completely understand your point of view, and I go like, okay, this is something I get what you're trying to say. But also, I hung out with Tone Vase. And did a commission for him just a while ago, and I heard his point of view, and I go like, well, I understand where you're coming from. And then it comes into let's say,
Do you
where it
think you
also
can get
started.
Tone Vase on this show?
Huh?
Do you think you can get Tone Vase on this show?
I don't know if he, he listens to me in that kind of capacity. I can ask him. I can send him the thing. I mean, he's happy to debate Craig Wright. I mean, that's where I met Tone for the first time, was that CC Forum conference, where the both
Was
of
it?
us, I believe, were at the same time watching the same stuff. So that's where I met Tone, and had a conversation with him, because I asked him also to come and sign the Bad Crypto piece, and that I did let for him to collect a piece from me, and then also commissioned for his unconfiscatable conference. And you know, and as you know, I know from your writings that you're not a big fan of the Litecoin people, and the Foundation Commission need to do another piece for them, and those kinds of things. But in order for me to backtrack a little bit, so that we don't, so that you understand where I'm coming from as a human being, and a part of my history is, like, let's say, when I was studying all the different kinds of religions, what I came to understand about Islam, for example, is the difference between Sunnis and Shias. So the Sunnis really believe in a spiritual democracy, and the Shias, this is again very crude stuff, and the Shias are more of the bloodline from the Prophet Muhammad. So you have to be from the bloodline in order to qualify and follow it that way, or otherwise it won't do. And then some people say that, well, you know, it's much bigger than that, and it should be a democracy, not only about kings or democracies and that kind of a thing. And that's the big divide in those communities. And they span from the Abrahamic religions, and you come from Judaism, that forks into Christianity, and that forks into Islam. And then Islam now states that we are the final and the last religion, and the last prophet is Muhammad. We respect all the other prophets, but this is really it, and this is what you should follow, because it all encompasses all others. But having understood what people, let's say in the Hindu tradition, how they look at things, they're totally incompatible, because again, it's like the Abrahamic religions don't have an awakening tradition, and you know, Islam doesn't provide any awakening, in the sense that the Hindus do, and they have a much older tradition than Islam is. So there's almost like this teenager and elder and totally different kind of dynamics going on over there. They're never going to see eye to eye of what the whole thing is. And I grew up listening to Rush. I was into prog rock, but I was also into Pink Floyd, and both of them are considered prog rock. But Rush was influenced by Ayn Rand and libertarian ideas. And if you've probably listened to Pink Floyd, you know Roger Waters is about as left as it gets. And ever since I was a kid, I was put like in between this compression point of these big ideas, and looking at the world in different ways, and having to wrestle with them from those. And I didn't get religious about religion. I have my sort of leanings towards in certain kinds of ways, but I made almost like a puzzle for myself out of them, with the big picture in mind. Is how is this relevant to my life, and if should there be some sort of an afterlife, how should I navigate my journey whilst I'm here? So now when I come into crypto, it's almost like people are asking me to choose my religion again, and in a forceful kind of way, saying that, you know, you should only believe in this and have this, or otherwise you're out. And if I release, and in a certain kind of sense, I understand how important money is and value and wealth and the whole system and everything. But if I didn't choose it on religion, like religiously, it's so foreign to me as a concept of why I would do it in crypto.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, on this channel, I'm looking to, debate people like Tony Vase because obviously there are a lot of, I mean, people are confused about the different chains and crypto in general, and those who like are wrong, sort of on purpose. I was just like, right, I'm just going to tell them straight. I'm gonna put them right. But obviously, in your position, with you sort of like working for News BTC, obviously I'm not going to debate or push you on topics because you've got to put food on your table and provide for a roof over your head and you have the heating on during winter. So they're very much BTC. Yeah, and only BTC.
I don't News BTC pretty much publishes, it's like it's constantly Ethereum and all the different kinds of coins and whatever. I don't think News BTC in particular is very BTC centric. I think they just started fairly early and there wasn't many other coins around at the time when they started doing it. But I don't, the platform itself doesn't come across as maximalist in that kind of sense.
Oh, okay. Maybe they might change. I was under the impression that they were sort of very maximalist. I know certainly one of the sites, I can't remember what it is. Well, things are, I mean, in this space, this is one of the things I do like about the crypto space and the fact that it's completely unregulated. So it's literally the Wild West. So, you've got propaganda sites that pop up and they can say whatever they want. They can like mislead people by twisting the truth and everything like this. But like for someone like me, I've seen through it totally because of my background, and I'm just like, well, if I put my case forward, I would love to hear their answer. But and I was thinking about doing that with you, but I'm not going to anymore. We're going to have a civil discussion.
Cool. Well, because essentially, I'm truly coming into the conversation with not only respecting obviously your channel and your time and being grateful that you invite me over and kind of I'm able to make my case and I'm happy to go through them. It's not like I'm trying to run from the conversations. I'm just trying to have these conversations from my actual point of view in order to try and deliver some further value into them so that it's not just so people can't box me easily into something and then negate what it is that what I'm trying to say. That's one of the frustrating things is like once you label yourself maxi or this camp or whatever, then that you're sort of put into a bracket and then you're safely there and you don't like you actually cut off a massive stream of people's attention away because you're so like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it also depends on what your view of that massive stream of people are. If that massive group of people, let's say a massive group of people that I would consider to be a bunch of scammers, I'm like good riddance. I don't need them in my life. I don't need to hear all their wrong points of view. Because I've studied and understand the system, and if they won't listen to what I have to say, then they're gonna learn the hard way anyway. So just leave them to it. It just saves me a headache.
Well, I'd like to actually have a talk with you because this was originally, as you know, Sean well. This was originally a conversation between me and Sean. And I'm not even sure if I'd heard it from somewhere or did I hear this from Sean or did it evolve in our conversation, but it's something that I talked with Craig Wright when he collected that piece of that public auction, because I listened to his talks and I listened pretty much for to his point of view for the first time properly there and a little bit afterwards. And because to me it seems that especially, let's say, the divide between BTC and BSV right now, it's a very politically oriented difference. And the way that I come into it, because I've read your piece on it as well, is like, for example, that from your point of view, you see that BCH is being used for illicit drugs and sort of dark market things and whatever. And like, while I'm someone who wants to obey the law, pay the taxes, do it right, and certainly not do crime and whatever. But for example, I'm someone who had quite a bit of violence done to me when I was a kid, and bad things went down. And I tried various different ways of how to self-heal and medicate, as many artists have, and people who've
was it physical or mental or both?
Both. There was quite a bit of interesting stuff that happened. Without going into further detail to that,
I can help you with all your PTSD, mate. I'll cure you in an instant. But we can do that later.
Well, I became a therapist myself and a bunch of other things, but it was psychedelics that really started making a massive difference. And as you know, psychedelics are illegal, and you can't really buy them. And of course, that like they've been with us for thousands and thousands of years, and they've influenced cultures from ancient Egypt
like ayahuasca
to the Mayans and ayahuasca and all of those kinds of things. So if you like with because Craig said he pretty much lumped them all together, and I said, like, with a lot of drugs, I don't disagree that they might not be very helpful for you to do like morphine in your backyard, like many are doing. But psychedelics was something, for me, it's one of the most profound crimes towards humanity, is that psychedelics are illegal right now, because they would help so many with this ideological possession thing, or traumas, or getting reconnected and those kind of things. So if let's say BCH is a way for people to trade that more safely and have, you know, these things that the grab of the law doesn't get to you because you're wanting to do something constructive like that, you know, there's, whether it's arguments for Edward Snowden or then WikiLeaks or what, like, because a part of the sort of let's say the Zeitgeist documentary is going into the what the economic hitmen are doing, and what the crimes of the state are, and the corporations and things like that, which have profound influence over the law. Then what my argument was to Craig Wright is that there's quite a bit of nuance to those conversations, whether what is considered legal and what's right, and that age-old thing. But what was most interesting that I really wanted to run past you of what your point of view might be, that this was the conversation with Sean, was that what if, because now the $1 trillion printing machine is going crazy, and they might, let's say the Fed has already said that, you know, they might not be able to pump the system back up after the next crisis, and then the corona hits, and I thought the system might only have 2 cycles maximum left to it before something really happens. And let's say the dollar, all of a sudden, its value tanks completely. And even though fiat currency, it definitely relies on big military and power and things like that. But what if you all of a sudden don't have bills that really pay the military? The military machine, for the most part, will stop. So what kind of, could we, because Sean being in Singapore, then you look at, you know, you have Malaysia and the surrounding countries, and then you have this beacon of progress, like you have Singapore. What if we end up in a situation that we all of a sudden don't have this linear progression as we've had for a long time, and all of a sudden we don't have America as we know it, or China as we know it, and the legal structures and systems that we have been in place for such a long time don't all of a sudden apply in a similar kind of way anymore as they did before? Because the one thing that I understand is that BSV very much wants to be in compliance and in collaboration with the current law system, whereas exactly BTC is what it's trying to do is to resist that kind of influence, or the central banking system, or the that kind of thing at large. And those I see the biggest sort of forks in terms of philosophy, and that's why I think both of them can have legs and a place. They don't need to mutually annihilate one another, or one only survive. I don't see it as a zero-sum game. I see it as, this has its use and this has its use, and maybe some others as well, even though probably the majority of all cryptos are fucking worthless and worth nothing and are going to scam people out of their money.
Yeah.
But those would be why in particular I can't easily get into the one currency game.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go into the drugs thing first of all. So I have seen the benefits of cannabis, particularly cannabis oil and how it can treat people with various different conditions. I think it's absolutely amazing. But we all know the reason it's illegal is because I think it's one of the owners back in the day, one of the owners of Nylon, was an extremely influential person, and he banned the use of hemp, or made hemp illegal on the grounds that it was a psychedelic drug, but basically it was just to protect his own investments in nylon. So he put this BS point forward. Yeah. Now, if this drug can be proven, and the statistics and the medical records are there to prove that it is actually beneficial to humans, that data, if an experiment is carried out, that data cannot be fiddled with. Whereas chances are this guy, who had the interest in nylon would have probably conducted this experiment, fiddled with the figures and said, "Oh, look, told you it's a useless, right? We have to make it illegal." This is what accountability and truth will reveal. They will reveal people that are being dishonest in the system. So drugs like psychedelics, like ayahuasca, that may have some potential benefits, rather than having some big corporate sitting on the true results and nobody being able to see them, and they spending they're spinning this political propaganda because they don't want it to be released to the public. That's not going to be the way it is anymore. The truth will be revealed. That's what I would say. So in terms of having drugs that are beneficial, it's going to be easier to regulate them when you can see what the truth behind them really is.
Well, yeah, I just don't really see that the world is going into that direction where our freedoms are being increased by the machinery, rather than, because let's say right now I see a lot of conversation going online about corona is that if you self-isolate, you're a bit of a sheep, and if you don't, then you're an asshole. And the whole thing is, well, was corona made in a lab or was it not, and this and that, and then you look at, like, let's say Edward Snowden just a while ago came out with what they're going to do again, or what they did with 9/11, and what kind of limitations of individual rights they're going to be come about through this, and because whether 9/11 was an inside job or not, that doesn't matter.
It was totally an inside job.
I don't know. I looked into it, and there's certainly weird stuff going on, but focusing into the individual freedoms that left, they didn't come back after the situation calmed down. And I think corona, whether man-made or not, or conspiracy or not, the powers that be certainly are exploiting every opportunity to take away individual freedoms as it passes by. And I'm not, in one way, I'm looking at it also that I've got, because all of these opinions about like what's going on, whether it be from the libertarian or from the more Marxist or whatever it is, I see these utterly insane opinions that just like scroll through my feeds, and people feeding all of this misinformation and all this kind of stuff. I also see it from the sort of how else would you do it then, other than quarantine people? People are like, oh, no one's dying. No, not yet. And they're not dying because we put some things into place. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're headed down straight to communism. It's just like, if you have a point of view of trying to get to some sort of a balance in things, it's really difficult to evaluate what's actually going on and what's true and what not. And I certainly don't have the answers, but I'm trying to figure it out. But yeah, but what I was trying to say is that there's certainly, like, I see more and more individual freedoms, or the whole mentality towards individualism altogether is being reduced further and further as I grow up and get older.
Well, yeah, I mean, so those sorts of things are reduced because a central authority has control of the system. Whereas, so if you add anonymity to a system, like, for example, Blockstream, when they added SegWit,
SegWit was, a segregated witness means segregating the signatures, and the signatures were what held each other to account. So basically, by segregating them, whoever it was, the single entity that added SegWit now basically has control of the system because they've made themselves non-accountable to anybody. Whereas let's say if you did have a centralized system, if the people who have created it are accountable to someone, there is nothing that anyone can do or that they can do that nobody else would know about. So therefore it doesn't matter if it's centralized, because the fact is they can't get away with messing around with the system. And so this was, the main issue between Bitcoiners and BTCers with Blockstream wanting to add SegWit. It was just like, well, if you add that, you're basically centralizing the system because you've got complete control of it. Nobody can see what you're doing. Whereas I don't think many BTCers understood what SegWit was.
Right. Yeah, and that's to a large degree. I remain fairly in a Padawan position with a lot of those things, is because just reading through a couple of your articles that you wrote, I learned a couple of things that I didn't know was the way that it went down. So I try and stay in my lane to a relative degree with these kinds of things, so I don't make a complete asshat out of myself. Which I'm sure
totally
I will.
Understand that.
But that's the thing, is like you have your point of view to it and what happened there, and before I would form an opinion of whether that's correct or not, I would have to listen to a bunch of other opinions by people and saying, well, this is from my point of view what happened there, and this is why it was good or bad, or things like that. And with regards to that particular issue, I just haven't heard all the arguments in order to say anything of any value to anyone.
Yeah. Well, also I understand your position. Working for News BTC. I am familiar with them, so I'm not gonna make life difficult for you in any way, shape, or form. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you do have. Just fire them at me. I'll tell you straight away.
Well, so is BTC, from your point of view, it's a centralized system?
Well, yeah. Since they've added SegWit, whoever it was, that centralized force that added SegWit, that segregated the witness, that segregated the signatures, so that it's now no longer a chain of signatures that validated each other. They have complete control of the system because there's nothing there to hold them accountable, so they can do whatever they want.
So is that because I've heard some counterpoints that Calvin R might have similar type of control over BSV. Is that utter bullshit then?
Well, this is it. If somebody has got control of the system, so long as they're open and transparent, you can see what they're doing.
Right.
And if you disagree with what they're doing, you can see it and you can do something about it. Whereas it's an open and fair system. That's the main thing. It's accountability that protects us, not anonymity. For example, if you're if you're trading with somebody, like anonymity is there was a funny example. I having a chat with somebody the other day about it, and we came to the sort of, I thought, a fairly humorous conclusion that anonymity is what you do in the toilet. You go into the toilet and you lock the door and nobody can see what you're doing. You come out and no one knows what's gone on. Yeah. Privacy is what you and your partner get up to behind a closed door. But you and your partner are engaging in that. But no third party can see what you're doing. But if one of you has an issue, like if you get rough with the other one, or you do something that the other person doesn't like, they can then report you. But only if they want to, if they've got a problem. So long as you're conducting trade honestly and reasonably and fairly, and both parties, come away from the deal happy with what they've got, then there are no issues, and there's nobody that needs to know about it. It's only when one partner, in that trade tries to screw the other one. So in business, what you do is it's money first, as we all know. Money talks and BS walks. So the medium of exchange is sent first, and then you expect the good or service in return. Hence, like the Misdescriptions Act, if you're getting a good that you didn't expect, or you didn't get the good at all, you can't invoke martial law and go to the person that you're trading with and put a gun to their head and say, look, give me my money back, because that's illegal and that, invokes chaos and havoc and, anarchistic societies and all that kind of stuff. So then you would go to the courts, and the courts, you would have to rely on the courts to enforce your trade or give you your money back. And then, but in order to do that, you have to prove that you have a reasonable expectation of that good or service. And the first thing the court is going to look at is, have you sent the medium of exchange that represents in value form the good or service that you expect? Do you have a right to expect that? So you have to prove that you've sent it. If that transaction is anonymous, you cannot prove that you've sent it to them, and they can't even prove that they've received it because it's anonymous. So therefore, global trade and commerce is never ever going to use an anonymous system. And to be honest with you, even drug dealers and criminals won't want to use an anonymous coin because they don't want to be identified as criminals. And it's only criminals that are going to use it. So by using it, you are outing yourself as a criminal. And unless you're a stupid criminal, you're not going to do it.
Right. So the way that I would so what's the worst case scenario, let's say with BTC, that you see that is going to happen because of this SegWit?
Oh, well, SegWit just simply centralizes the system because, they're, like I said, you can't validate the transactions. You can't hold anybody accountable because they're segregated. Whereas if they were in the chain, everybody's accountable to someone. So therefore, like I said, nobody can do something that the other person wouldn't know about. But there's two issues with BTC. The second one is obviously, so they're not scaling the chain, so therefore they're scaling off chain. And if data is not going through the chain, then it's not immutable, because the blockchain is all about immutable data. So if you're just simply sending data to another person, as in numbers, in similar to sending an email to somebody, unless that actually goes through a business that is registered as a money service business and holds a money transmitter license, that data is not recognized as legal tender by the courts, because it has to have a money transmitter license. In order to say to the court, we've got this license, we're recognized as an official, trusted, third party. You can trust these figures because we're putting them on our ledger. Whereas,
sorry to cut you off, but basically, because I'm really trying to understand. But can, as a payment system, let's say all of that, whether it's legal or not or whatever, is there something that can happen to BTC because of this centralized control of anonymity? That, let's say, if I am a criminal somewhere and I want to send my BTC to another criminal, is there now a third party who can come in between, that someone somehow can take the system down or prevent these payments from happening?
Well, yeah, because it's a centralized system. Whoever it was, whoever the centralized force was that added segregated witness, has control of the system.
And this can be, no one knows who this person is or this group of people.
Well, the person who did it knows who they are. And they control the system.
But okay, so what you're saying is that the promise of Bitcoin as BTC is not fulfilled in that it's trustless, borderless, or no one can control it. You're saying that this is not how it actually is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, then it makes sense that you would have the point of view that you have. I'm just trying to figure out why there are so many people who don't agree with you.
Well, it's not the fact they don't agree, it's the fact they don't understand.
but there's plenty of people who've been in Bitcoin almost ever since it first started, who are still in Bitcoin and say all of those things, that it's open, borderless, trustless, and secure, and no one can fuck with it. That's, let's say, someone like Charlie Shrem, that's pretty much his point of view, and he's been ever since almost the beginning in this thing. So are you saying that he's only saying those things because he has invested interest to say so?
He probably doesn't understand what SegWit is. I mean, all these people that churn out that same narrative, are churning out the narrative of Bitcoin before segregated witness was added. They just don't understand that it's been added, because it was added later on. So. And from their point of view, they were like, well, why would anybody add something to a system if it's going to devalue it? It doesn't make sense. So therefore, if it doesn't make sense, whoever's saying that what they did was wrong is incorrect.
All right. Well, I definitely have to look into this more because I'm like, for the sake of this conversation, I'm not sure if I'm me learning this thing is going to help a lot of the people who might be your audience, as I'm presuming many of them are into BSV already and probably know this and agree with you. So I'm just conscious of their time as well. This is obviously homework that I need to do further. But I'd just come into certain things that I might have something to value add to, and going back a little bit to those religions, for example, and the differences in between them, and Islam stating and that I am the last one and the last prophet, and that turned out to be true, not true, like let's say with Scientology. We have a very recent phenomena of a science fiction writer who made this thing happen, and whether you like it or not, and especially if you come from, let's say, the point of view from the older traditions, it's some of it is beyond belief that would become such a power as it is in the world right now, and have legs and continue to grow as opposed to anything else. And I'm just looking at money as a system altogether, is that a lot of it has so much to do with this faith-based mechanism, and would it be even to the point of view that almost every system that we have on earth, it relies upon a certain amount of interaction and trust into that system up until it erodes, and then it becomes Venezuelan Bolivar. But whatever it is, it's not only money, but some things simply because there's a congregation and energy within that structure, then it does have value. And from those kinds of points of views, that I see that there's a massive community behind Ethereum who keep building things, especially as an artist, looking at NFTs and smart contracts and things like that are definitely needed in the art world. And I know there's a lot of maxis who say, well, just give it time, wait, and Bitcoin, BTC will be able to scale up to it and provide all of those services, but it's happening too slow. A lot of these services are needed now, and there's a bunch of fucking starving artists who've been digital artists for 20 years like myself, who've been waiting for some of these solutions to come along, and now these artists are congregating to make these new things happen on these new platforms. So from that point of view, when I had this conversation with Tone Vase, he's like, yeah, but this is the most trusted system and this and that. But I'm going like, well, you're not following where I'm at as tightly. But he just happens to see that Ethereum is organized crime. It's like printing money that shouldn't exist, and he looks at it as in like probably the same way as you look at other things. Is like, well, that's criminal activity. That's the weird juxtaposition that I find myself with because I'm a refugee from the art world that is so unbelievably fucking corrupt that it's unreal. And then I come here and I find my sort of home, and then I'm asked to, like, this is already like a niche. Crypto is a niche, and of course with the monetary power of the world, crypto is a niche, but it's growing. And crypto art is a further niche, like to the point of like it's almost laughable to anyone who's really doing something, let's say a quote unquote adult in the art world, is scarcely tampering with this new fucking joke that the art world thinks that this whole thing is, or anything from the established point of view. Like obviously, so in that way, I'm certainly super early into the crypto art game, and maybe deserved of being an OG guest on your show, that kind of a way, because that happens almost overnight. But my ambitions were so vast that I really wanted to make a dent to the whole of the culture, the whole of the world, in a certain kind of sense, to put these concepts together and make things happen. And a part of the interest in crypto is to be here for the resources. And right now, choosing, let's say all of a sudden I went like, oh no, shucks, it's only BSV and everything else is fucking crap, and that's it, or BTC, whatever it is. All of a sudden, I've further divided a niche of a niche into a further small grouping of something, therefore negating the whole purpose of why I feel I'm on this planet to begin with, which is to put these vast concepts and projects together that unite people over boundaries. But I'm not saying this to do it in a naive sort of sense. Oh, let's all just fucking sing kumbaya and be friends together. Even in the art community, you're already seeing it, that people are really nice to each other on the surface level, and then the fucking knives come out immediately from behind you. And now it's even become in the crypto art community more volatile. People are directly attacking those who have more reputation to lift themselves up and do all
Jealousy,
of these fucking shady fuckery, you know, which was like, oh, I thought I'd get away from this shit, but getting out of the art world, but no. It's good. Where there's money, there's fuckery, right?
Oh, massively, yeah. But I mean, also, you know, I mean, it's just the old, you know, the example of scarce resources. Really, it's kind of, I had a friend of mine who, you know, was desperate to climb the corporate ladder. You know, worked his ass off, got there in the end. But he said, you know, when you're a young whippersnapper, you know, all you're doing is looking at what's above you and what's ahead. And you're chasing it and trying to get it and trying to get it and trying to get it. And then he said, when you get there, you know, and there's no more space to look at the top. Suddenly you look down below you and there's all these snakes, you know, trying to bite you and pull you down. And you basically spend the rest of your time fending them off. So, you know, so it was just like, you know, on his way up, it's a struggle because you're trying to get there. You're on like this greasy pole trying to climb up there, you know, and then when you're up there, you've got all these, you know, people trying to drag you back down again. You know, he was thinking that he was going to get to the top of a mountain and, you know, enjoy the view. And it's not really turned out that way.
That's really fucking accurate.
Yeah, well, this is life, isn't it? I mean, if you know every bit of attention that you get, you know, you're taking away from someone else. So, you know, depending on whether that person is a negative person or a positive person, you know, I mean, if they're a positive person, they'll wish you luck and just try their best and achieve and sort of take inspiration from you. But if they're a negative person, they'll, you know, try and take it from you rather than sort of like, you know, earn it. Really, you know.
Very super agreed. And I suppose this is one conversation that I've had with a lot of libertarians in the crypto art space, and in a certain kind of sense, it's almost like a backhanded compliment. But it's because usually the libertarians that I meet, they're very smart. They take responsibility. They've learned a bunch of stuff. They have skills, and they have a certain kind of attitude towards life, and they tend to be doing fairly okay because they're very self-reliant and hate to be told what to do and all of that kind of stuff. But then where I think they go a little bit wrong is assuming that everyone in the world is like them or should be like them. There's such a minority is that even I think in the animal kingdom you have usually it's something like 11 betas to 1 alpha leader type of situation.
Okay.
And that doesn't, I think in the human realm it's like, I'm not talking in the sense that you have power over others, but let's say you want to self-direct your own life as much as possible would be an alpha quality, as opposed to the guy who beats everyone down, or that's even such a bullshit sort of way of looking at it. But that's where I'm coming from, is that you have these like, it's almost like a golden ratio, is that this is what nature produces, is that these self-propelling sort of individuals. And if you are one of those, you can't assume that the whole of the world will look like how you want it to look like, because the majority of people aren't like that. So we have to have these systems and structures in place in order for this whole thing to not implode, which is what it seems to be very much at the brink of for a multitude of reasons. So it's a fairly strange time to be alive.
It is a fairly strange time to be alive. There's so many different people's points of views on it. It's also an exciting time to be alive because there's a process. You know, when something new comes along, there is a process involved, and it goes in this order. It goes forming, norming, storming, and performing. I learned that from my sister. So forming is when like a group of people come together. Storming is when you're sort of battling out and finding your social role and sort of, you know, where you could possibly fit within the system. Are you needed? Are you surplus to requirements? Can you add, you know, value? You know, what you do fit in effectively.
Then you've got performing. I said forming, storming. Oh, norming. So norming is kind of like getting used to your social roles and becoming part of the group. And then performing is when you're actually sort of working together to achieve something. To be constructive. And so that's so with crypto at the moment, we're very much going through the storming phase. People coming together, they're throwing their ideas in the pot. People have got different ideas and outcomes about what they want and how things should be, and mixed messages and stuff. Obviously, Satoshi Nakamoto used a pseudonym, and so people could. I could fully understand why they would think, oh, he's used a pseudonym, therefore it's meant to be an anonymous system and nobody can trace him, and therefore we can do what we want and we can buy drugs and we can get away with loads of illegal shit, and But unfortunately, like I said, if you've got an anonymous system, although your intentions might be honourable, you cannot help, the production of and the selling of child abuse images. Because, where there's a will, there's a way. And that's, people will find a way to do that. So it's, it's kind of like letting the snake in the door. And in an anonymous system, you cannot prevent the snake from coming in the door. Which is why it was the pseudonym was essential. So obviously people know that, Satoshi filed his taxes in Bitcoin in 2009 with the Australian tax authorities. They've got it on record. There's no way that you could pay that amount of tax. And it was also listed as Bitcoin. So the Australian tax authorities knew who Satoshi Nakamoto was. And it's but what people didn't understand is the fact that he, as I mentioned in that article, he had to decentralize the starting point, because if a currency has a starting point, it means that basically anyone anywhere can also start exactly the same thing themselves. And if they can start the same thing themselves, it means there's an infinite supply, which means it has no value whatsoever. So how do you give something value when it's the very start point that means it shouldn't have one? Because it means that anyone can start it. And also it means that if someone can start it, it also means that America could start one and China could start one. And if either of those two superpowers start one, they're just simply never going to agree to use it through pure political policy. China's never going to accept a currency that America controls, and America's never going to accept a currency that China controls or Russia controls or anything like that. So how do you get them to agree on something?
Why do we need to have one world currency? Why can't there be several?
Again, if you have a current, the issue with currency is centralized control. So if you're in America, do you like the fact that the government have just decided, right, we're going to now print $6 trillion and we're not going to compensate you for the inflation that you're going to endure on your savings?
No, but if there's multiple decentralized currencies as opposed to just one.
Multiple decentralized currencies?
Yeah.
Well, a currency can't be decentralized if it has a centralized starting point, because whoever it was that created it has control over the system.
Right. So, one evolution of digital currency would be that someone comes up with a way of how to set up a currency that would truly be decentralized. We could trust utterly that there's no one has any control over it. Are we still waiting for that to happen then?
Well, this is it. So what Satoshi Nakamoto did is he realized this issue, and so he decentralized the starting point of Bitcoin. So he wrote the white paper in English and released it to the Western world, but he distanced himself from the Western world, which is where the white paper was released, as far as he could, by giving himself a Japanese pseudonym. And
no, I get that, and being like knowing how many centralized with their name attempts there were to come up with a currency, how they were shut down, and of course, he would have put himself at great risk at that point in time, like coming up with the whole thing. So I get that, like, totally.
Yeah. So what he was saying about, there's no other currency, or there's no other distributed ledger technology that doesn't have a decentralized starting point. Bitcoin is the only one.
Right. So as in BSV.
or just Bitcoin in general. So it's, I mean, BTC and BSV and BCH, they if you were to get rid of, either of those chains that are on it, the coin that you're left with has its starting point at the Bitcoin Genesis block.
Right. Okay.
Because they were split in the chain. They weren't they weren't completely separate projects. So they still have the network effect of Bitcoin, but a chain split, because a medium of exchange is competitive by nature, because it's a tool, and therefore people will just simply use the tool that does the job in the best way, which is the facilitation of trade. That's the one that everybody's going to use. So obviously, legal protection and legal recourse in trade is fundamental to its utility, because there's no way that a huge multinational business would ever trade using buying multiple billions worth of products and stuff like that with somebody in China without there being any legal protection, international legal protection in that trade.
I completely understand. I just don't, because I mean, the legal corporations and their payment systems are pretty much a given. They can operate, and like having listened to a whole bunch of Andreas Antonopoulos, he's pretty much the first beacon of like information that I got when I came into the space. He's the one that I started listening to, and it's how the monetary system now almost is like a regulatory arm of the sort of policing state. They tell what the banks or what the rules are, and then they tell the corporations or what the rules are. And as we see these bailout programs unfolding every time there is now a crisis with this current system, we see that the corporations and the banks continuously are bailed out, and then the money is taken off of the sort of future earning potential of the people, and they get given a small slice now with Corona, as opposed to the majority going to the corporations. So me personally, as an artist, and my point of view, I'm not really that bothered or worried about the corporations. I'm worried about what happens to the savings and the value that is with the majority of people all over the world.
And it plummets, mate. Plummets.
And of course, the third world places that have no access to any of these financial systems to begin with. And I'm very much interested in seeing which ones are the coins that evolve towards facilitating maybe as a multitude, or just one that starts to take the cake, as in where people can take this mass adoption to the same level from that point of view, as opposed to the corporations. I get where you're coming from, but it's the legal status or the illegal status is like going back to the conversation about the psychedelics and things like that. Is like, let's say with communism, because you had this whole very sort of conglomerative centralized system and all enterprises under the government arm, and what happened with that and where it eventually led to is that you have this totalitarian system that, this is so fucking weird as well. I read the Wikipedia page on communism yesterday, the whole thing from start to finish. I'm not going into the links, obviously, but there was not a single mention of the murders of the approximately 100 million dead that the system and the sort of arms and forks of that produced along the way. And
is this China and Russia you're talking about?
Yeah, and Cambodia and everything. And there's not a single mention of the camps or the gulags or what actually went on. It was almost like this
serious
chit chat on some worldview differences, whether you're into Mao or you're into Lenin.
That's outrageous.
I was like, can this fucking be real? It's almost like talking Nazis and Hitler, but as in it was just a little bit of a difference of opinion, right? I'm like, all right. So you have this one world totalitarian, and that was law and still is law to a relative degree. You go to the Communist Party is very much in control in China, and it's this whole amalgam of things, and they're legal. And I'm going like, okay, to me, the legality point of view, or the sort of recourse thing of getting your money back and all of those kinds of things, they're not the most fundamental principle, even though as a law-abiding citizen and staying in my lane, apart from maybe some psychedelics in the jungle in Mexico sometimes are a different kind of thing. But it's like, I think it's needed that we have those systems, that those who really need to do the right thing, even though that might not be legal, is an option. But I'm trying to understand why it is so essential from your point of view that that you know, the corporations or the big massive business adopt this one thing.
Well, it's well, first of all, it's let's take the issue with money. Okay, so I'm an entrepreneur. I'm very passionate about people who stick their neck out to start a business, because if a business is successful, it's it's because it's providing a service that people desire and therefore they're willing to pay for, and they make profits from it. But the issue is that with the money that we use at the moment, banks issue it out. So therefore, if they just simply issue it out, if there's no interest rate on it, there is no urgency to return it in any particular amount of time. People would just simply wait for another handout, when it came along, and that was it. So they have to put the interest rate on it in order to give it a kick in the arse, so it gets circulating to, as a sense of urgency, so people create stuff with it. But the issue is that in order for the interest to be returned on that money, the interest has to already be out in the economy, and so therefore the bank has to issue more money at another at the interest rate again and pump that in. So it's a never-ending cycle of inflation that's constantly going into the economy, and eventually what will happen? Well, there's two things. So one, they put the interest rate on it in order to give it velocity, but then every time they print money, it actually devalues it further, because it's less and less scarce. So businesses are struggling. One, they're dealing with an interest rate that's put on the money that's lent to them, and then secondly, they're also dealing with the rate of inflation, with its devaluation. So it just means that your money is not a store of value, because it actually it decreases in value, which means that if there is an economic bump in the road, and money loses value, businesses can go bust within a week. But imagine if they were using a medium of exchange like gold that was actually divisible. So therefore they'd been saving that gold, and the gold was deflationary, so therefore it was increasing in value over time. If an economic bump in the road came along, they would have the financial resources to be able to deal with it. That's where I'm coming from. But ironically, the reason currency was created was the fact that gold, because it was divisible, it was very impractical to just simply weigh it out, and weigh out different weights, every time you conducted trade. So what they did is they tokenized it by saying, well, actually, there's a bit of gold and that's how much it's worth. Instead of weighing it out, you just simply give them the certificate. And that vastly accelerated trade. And the acceleration of trade is what led to economic prosperity and wealth for everybody. But the kick in the nuts that we had to take in exchange for that was inflation. Because currency doesn't increase in value like gold does. So even though currency was a tokenized version of gold, the fact is it's inflated, and therefore that's what causes all this problem. Whereas with Bitcoin, for the first time ever, now we actually have a currency that is divisible and therefore deflationary. So therefore, if you've been conducting business, and using Bitcoin for a long period of time, like I said, when an economic bump in the road comes along, you're actually using a medium of exchange that's increasing in value. So therefore, you've got the financial resources to be able to deal with, issues that come along.
No. This is more familiar because of the banking system structure and the documentary film, and the big picture of this is something that I had. It's more the intricacies of what happened along the way to the forks and SegWits and the different kinds of players. Those I have a lot more to learn with, but the big picture I got, and as what the system is designed for, and what it is for the first time ever. So but it's always always good to hear it again.
Well, also, the main thing is really, this is, again, I won't go into detail with you because of your position that you're in, but it's one of the basic questions I would love to ask you at a BTC is, well, how do you define Bitcoin? Because there seems to be three trains of thought. Some people say, oh, it's the ticker symbol that defines Bitcoin. Other people will say, no, it's the community that
defines Bitcoin, and we can change it. We can change it to whatever we like. And other people will say, no, it's the white paper that defines Bitcoin, because Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, so therefore he's the only one that has the right to define what it is. And he defined it as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, and then described the protocol which defines Bitcoin. So therefore, if the protocol no longer follows Satoshi's design, what right do they have to call it Bitcoin? Well, so SegWit is not in the white paper. So it's just like, well, how can you call it Bitcoin if it doesn't operate how Bitcoin is supposed to?
But here we get into the I suppose the larger problem of forks altogether, and maybe to the same thing is that often when you have let's say you have a pack of wolves or something, and then you have another alpha that is born, and then they need to challenge the head alpha if they want to get anywhere. And if they don't want to get into a lethal battle with the head wolf, then they might go and set up a tribe of their own somewhere so that they avoid the sort of bloody battle of things. And from that point of view, what you just said is like, if you put it into a religious context, with the Abrahamic religions, you're just basically saying that if you don't follow the original commandments and Torah, what the fuck right does Christianity have to exist, or Islam for that matter? So essentially all of those communities or forks, or the forks of Christianity, whatever, should just evaporate because they don't follow the original commandments or tablets. So
well, they just call themselves a different name.
Well, they do. I mean, it's Christianity as opposed to Judaism, but they undeniably come from the same source and just have quite vast differences actually in between them when you really get into those things. But that's the whole thing. It doesn't, even though it doesn't follow the original sort of tablets, so to speak, that doesn't prevent it from becoming a force in the world and people seeing value and trade in amongst those types of things. So I'm just wondering if it has to be a zero-sum game in this kind of sense that it gets often presented inside the crypto communities. But I might be wrong with this. I'm openly saying that I've got so much to learn with the intricacies of this, and I'm mostly here from my point of view to do something for the big systemic change, while understanding that if I don't get my core right and understand where this is coming from, there's no big propulsion anywhere if your direction is entirely wrong. So you know, and this is part of why I really wanted to have this conversation. I really want to understand these things from a multitude points of view, but I don't have a position per se, or position in a way that, you know, because I write for News BTC, that I'd have to be a maxi or only talk positive about Bitcoin. I mean, that's not where I'm personally coming from. I try and maintain quite open and then make my own value judgments. But then, you know, if you choose to go with that, or you choose to go with whatever, then I'm not here to tell other people what to do with their lives.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I'll sort of try and simplify, my rationale behind this. So, do you know what wampum is? Have you heard of wampum?
No, that's the first.
All right, okay. Well, wampum was a currency that the North American Indians used to use before they met the Europeans when they came over. And
right.
And wampum was if ever you see pictures of Indians and you see them, they have beads around their wrists and around their ankles and around the heads and around the necks. That's wampum. It's kind of jewelry. So it was made from a very rare shells that were found on a particular beach, and because they were rare, they could be sort of like, in the North American Indians understood money. They were like, right, well, this thing has to be scarce, so we can sort of tell that it's relatively genuine. And then the making of the beads is the proof of work. So they were like, well, depending on how valuable this trade is, you get obviously more beads and a larger amount of wampum, which sort of represents the medium of exchange, which you can hopefully use for exchange for another deal at a later date in time. The sort of represents the value. But when the Europeans came over and they used gold, because gold was even more scarce and even harder to come by, smaller amounts were more valuable. So therefore, a smaller amount is far more easier to conduct using trade, because you were like, there's a little bit of gold, now you can give me this big bit of land. Because it was scarce. Whereas if you were using wampum, this thing would go on for would be feet long, and then you've got to store it somewhere. Yeah, whereas gold was not only more scarce and more precious because it was harder to extract from the ground, so therefore there was an even increased chance of it being more genuine. Because it was divisible and malleable, it was more easier to trade. Yeah, because you could shape it, and you could divide it further. So and eventually, because gold fulfilled trade in a more suitable, in a more efficient way, wampum was eventually phased out. And that's what's going to happen with cryptocurrency. People are just simply going to use the one that fulfills trade in the best way, and that's the one that the one that fulfills trade in the best way is going to be the one that the majority of people use. So the issue with BTC and all these other things is the issue of closed markets. So if you have a closed market, it means that other people outside of that closed market cannot use it, and if they cannot use it, it's of no value to them whatsoever. So let's say the issue with BTC only doing 7 transactions a second, if those 7 transactions a second are currently taken up, it's completely useless to anyone else outside of it who hasn't got one of those 7 transactions a second going on. They can't use it. It's completely useless to them. So therefore, the first thing is, a currency has to scale in order to encompass the entire market that it's aimed at. Yeah, so it has to scale for global trade effectively. And then also it has to fulfill trade in the way that global trade desires, and one of the ways is to actually carry legal protection with it. So if you're looking at BCH, who are just like, right, we're going to go anonymous, then there's no legal protection in the trade because drug dealers don't want legal protection because they're conducting illegal activity. Then commercial trade is just like, well, that's no good to us. Yes, sir.
Dollars, though. I mean, as far as I understand, the majority of the world's crime has been and still is done through U.S. dollars and barrels of oil. But they, even though it has that connotation, doesn't new technology always at first? I mean, internet was only pornographers and criminals, and then it evolved. I mean, but wasn't that the perception of the internet when we first started with this as well? It just evolved out of there fairly quickly.
Well, I mean, people are always going to find uses for things, and it's usually what you would class as entrepreneurs who find the use case first, which is probably why they started using it for drugs. They were just like, oh, this is a new technology, nobody understands it. We're going to use it for drugs. But if you start using it for illegal activity that is harmful to society, for example, like the trading of child abuse images, the government is going to very quickly step in and shut it down because a lot of people are going to be unhappy with it, and it's going to be damaging a lot of people, particularly children. So therefore,
sure. But as an argument, let's say like pedophilia is obviously a fucking awful problem, but in comparison to like, let's say there's a bunch of sex workers at the moment who can't get their bank accounts, that they can't get, just staying within the realm of sex. There's a bunch of activity that from like this day and age probably should be regulated and be a part of the normal system, but because we have a bunch of other legacy systems and the rules of thought of what would come into that, now these people can't really operate and get tested and be safe in a certain kind of way. And crypto, as far as I understand, has started to provide solutions, but from the majority point of view, those solutions then aren't good because they don't comply with the same sort of realm that made their business and activity illegal to begin with. All I'm trying to say is that there's like the pedophilia fucking problem for sure, but isn't that quite of a minority problem in terms of the scale of things?
Well, I mean, you have to look at there's pros and cons to everything. Like if you eat too many carrots, you can die because you need a balanced diet. Do you know what I mean? So everything.
Jesus, you got to be into carrots, man.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. Well, I mean, there was a kid in the UK recently who died from eating. He lived on, fish and chips. And something else. So it's fish and chips can kill you. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like it's looking at how detrimental is something. The positive and the negative, the positive and the negative effects. Yeah, but what we're saying is the issue with money is the fact that somebody has a central control of it and they can print it into infinity. And how is that fair on the rest of society? Now, money was, like I said, it was a currency was it's effectively like tokenized gold. And the reason gold worked well is because it was spread all around the world. Everybody had equal opportunity to mine it, and it facilitated trade in a really good way. Bitcoin still allows everybody to use it. If you want to use it to conduct criminal activity, by all means, fill your boots. But chances are you're going to get rumbled. So your choice if you want to take that risk.
Sure, but so in order to further for me to understand your point of view, so you're saying that let's say the BTC chain of things, can there now be someone who starts to print them into infinity, kind of like the legacy banking system does, or is that still locked to the 21 million, as is the general perception of it?
Well, it depends. I mean, whoever it was that implemented SegWit can change the amount if they want. They have complete control of the system. They can do whatever they want. They added SegWit. They can add the number of Bitcoin if they want.
That's a real problem if that's true.
Well, that's what SegWit is. I mean, that's why there was such a big that's why there was such a big deal about it. You know what I mean? It was horrendous. I mean,
So with regards to BCH and BSV, is that not the case or the same case?
Well, the SegWit is not in. It's not in the white paper. But the issue with BCH is that they want to. Well, with BTC, it's kind of obvious that they don't want to scale the chain. But so first of all, they've implemented SegWit, which makes the chain centralized and effectively valueless and useless. But then they were just like, right, well, we're going to build this second layer, Lightning network. But like I said, unless you have a money transmitter license, that data is not recognized as legal tender. So therefore, if there is a dispute in that trade, you cannot go to court and expect the court to enforce it, because the court's like, well, we don't recognize that as legal tender. You've not sent the value that represents that good or service that you expect. So therefore, you have no right to have any reasonable expectation of that good, because you've been using something that we don't know. So
I get that. I just have a far more bigger problem with the fact that someone might be able to inflate the currency and fuck with the system somehow. But obviously, there's probably going to be a bunch of people who are going to jump at my throat for even uttering the words. And
well, yeah, I'm sweating. Sweating for you already, mate. To be honest, that's why I don't want to sort of ram it down your throat or anything, because.
No, well, I'm gonna.
Well, tell you what you should do.
Into that further. But...
Tell you what you should do. Anybody who jumps down your throat, just tell them to jump on this show instead. I'll deal with them.
Right. Okay, but that's not how things really work in a certain kind of sense, because going back to the original conversation that I had about this accusation of having sexism because the females are quote unquote unrepresented in this piece for and about women with women, so it's the sort of tribal allegiances and the sort of thing is like, if you say that, then you're out. If you believe that, then you're in. If you're this kind of thing, it's very sort of tribal in that kind of a sense. And I'm trying to remain as open as possible in order to, before making any decisions about anything, at least confirm again and come to that conclusion, and then say, yes, this is obviously what I believe. As I said, truth is the guiding light on things, but it's like the debate when the first attack came about this art piece, then whatever I made as an argument was then negated, and that wasn't, and there was a new attack, and then when I addressed that, there was a new thing and whatever, and it was like it's just
political spin, mate. They're just trying to neg you out.
Yeah, because it was so obvious, and I'm calm about it. I don't give a fuck right now. I have too much life behind, and I know where I'm coming from, so I'm not threatened in that kind of a way. But the whole thing was that I can see the spin at work, which is that you take the bad faith, worst possible interpretation, leaving out the thing that was a counter argument, and if you don't have an argument, then eventually you just block and say "fuck you."
That's just politics, mate. It's just somebody. You've got to look at the reason behind why they're doing it to understand why they're doing it. It sounds to me like this person just kind of like doesn't want you to feel, you know, I guess they don't want you to feel as though you're sort of getting one up on them in a way. Maybe, you know, the amount of. I mean, it's a great thing that you've done. I mean, you're getting £1 million to raise money for something like that. I would suggest that somebody else is just feeling rather inadequate because they couldn't do it. That's what I think.
Could be a part of it, or just a bad day or week, or something, which is something that a lot of people are going through. And I'm not like an unforgiving person or anything like that, but it's so and critique is good as well. I mean, when it comes from a good
so
place,
long as it's constructive.
Yeah, tries to build something.
Constructive criticism.
Yeah, but I think it is actually somewhat personally motivated in that sort of a sense, and whatever. It's just
like
I wish the thing would have been brought up in a slightly different way, but that's how it goes. Never mind to bring it up. But that's in part what is a little bit worrisome, I suppose, getting into the intricacies and truth of things and trying to understand things, is that because, you know, the human psychology and the forking and the tribal allegiances are at play here constantly. And I'm trying to be mindful of the thing that, okay, so here are these bunch of games, and that was actually quite cool what Jordan Peterson once again him came up with as an example of play, which I thought was, I think the psychologist Piaget, who said, like he was parroting him, is that the whole idea is why you shouldn't cheat in a game if you're playing football or something like that, is that in order to cheat to win or be an asshole about it, is that because you want to be invited to come and play again. And then the real winner is that who gets invited to play again and again in a multitude of different games in order to be in a position to have influence over a bunch of things and have a good attitude about it. And those kinds of things. Is that there's this global banking system game that is going on, and I'm definitely not a part of that. And there's this crypto multitudes of games that are going on over here, and this obviously feels much more at home. But the real propulsion machine of this is meant to be combating a much larger thing. So it's like how you make your allegiances or show your support to things or whatever. It's like whether to go smaller, or whether to see how much can be propelled against something that really is influencing the lives of billions, and especially those who are not in the system at all. Like Andreas talks about how is it like 3.5 billion people who are not, or 4.5 in the banking system altogether, and it's just the perspective and the utter magnitude of the world's problems, or whether it comes from the different religious forks or those kinds of tribal allegiances or those things. I'm trying to find some sort of a medium and a balance between these things, and I think that just sort of sums it up, is that I'm trying to find balance, and I'm trying to be as good of a person as possible as I go about this, and while fulfilling a certain kind of mission and ambition to be a part of this whole thing. And to be quite frank, it's quite a scary thing to go deeper and deeper into these forks, because it goes into this type of territory, and all of a sudden, well, you know what I mean.
Well,
and that's not necessarily why I'm here.
The way to look at cryptocurrency is we'll use eBay as an example. eBay forms a natural monopoly because you have the best chance of achieving the best price of the item that's auctioned when you have the largest market looking at it. So therefore, why would you use a smaller auction site who might be saying to you, oh yeah, come and use us, our fees are less? It's just like, well, you might use them because your fees are less, but chances are you won't achieve the best price because you've got such a small number of people looking at it. So therefore, everybody will just simply flock to eBay because you've got the greatest chance of achieving the best price for your product. And cryptocurrency is the same. It's a medium of exchange. It's a tool that facilitates trade. So with it being a tool, it's best if everybody uses it, because therefore everybody is holding it, and therefore everybody can use it to conduct trade with. So therefore, it's going to be the one that facilitates trade in the best way. So it has to encompass the entire market. It can't be a closed market, of which, anonymous coins are closed because global and commercial trade just simply won't use it. If it can't scale, then just means that it can't scale to cater for everybody. So that means that not everybody can use it. And the other one is obviously the centralized point of control. Money has to be neutral. So what people don't realize is that it's the growth of the Bitcoin network over a period of 10 years without any central point of authority or influence that neither China or America can replicate. That's why Satoshi Nakamoto had to use a pseudonym and fundamentally step away from the project. Because if he had been identified, his credibility would have been called into question, or his political incentives, or whatever, and it would have completely undermined the value. Because the value is the growth of this network without any central point of authority, influence, or control. That's what neither America or China can replicate overnight. It's been around for 10 years now.
Well, those are of all the things that you mentioned, like whether it's the mass adoption of business and government and those kinds of things, and if it's BSV that gets adopted, or Cardano, I know they're working on their relationships, or a bunch of people are attempting the same kind of vein of things and becoming, and very likely it is only one or two that are going to be emerging as the top of that realm. But then there is the sort of political dissident side that is very much in terms of politically and faith-based put into BTC more at this moment in time.
Well, with Cardano, not many people know this, but do you know that it's only IOHK, called Input Output Hong Kong, that can mine Cardano?
Right. No, I didn't know that. I haven't looked into the project.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So it's a single miner. So basically, all the government does is shut that one mining source down, and Cardano is dead. That's it.
It's done.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So that's never going to go anywhere.
Well, but saying like, I'm going to have to look into that too. But essentially, the only problem thus far that I'd like to get confirmation on and study further, that I do think is an actual real problem, is whether someone can or cannot deflate the 21 million coins of BTC, whether that system is compromised or not compromised. That's something that I can't at this moment say anything about, because I've never heard it put like as you did it just now. So I'm going to look into that. But that's the real problem that I would have with BTC. None of either the political inclinations, or whether it gets used for this or that, or those, is that there is a counter for the politically dissident to the other side. I think it's important that there is a competing system that keeps that system to a relative degree in check, at least as an idea. And altogether, otherwise, I think it's a good thing that there's competition for coins, because they keep each other in check, because there's constant innovation. I mean, even just the fact that as a crypto artist, as much as I'd like to have dominance over being the only crypto artist or the best crypto artist, the real truth of the matter, what keeps happening day to day, is that I see that some of the ones that I respect and are doing really interesting things have done yet again another innovation, or something that just happened. We go, fuck, I gotta push harder. I gotta get on this train and not be sitting on my ass trying to think that I've achieved something. No, fuck yeah, we're building new worlds literally that weren't possible just a couple of years ago, and their reputations and opportunity and markets are being opened. Like yesterday, Coldie's this Citadel 6.15 just opened with 40 crypto artists that had a collaborative virtual reality exhibition for the first time ever in the world. And it was something like that pulled off because crypto voxels came around just a while ago. And now there are people like me who are digital artists and interested in not only in just making art, but for the whole worldview and utilizing the technology and pushing this whole thing forward. And that's super fucking exciting. And I'm thrilled that there are people that I consider to be threats That's
competition.
awesome.
Well, this is I mean, it's funny you should actually just you should make that point there, because this is the whole point of cryptocurrency. If something else comes along and fulfills trade in a better way, eventually it will just simply be dominant. Because if it fills the trade in the best way, that's eventually what everybody will just simply flock to. So cryptocurrency is a constantly evolving medium of exchange, because it has to stay the best. It has to be the biggest. It has to be the best. It has to be the fastest. It has to be the most inclusive. It has to be the most tech savvy. It has to be everything, because something else will just simply come along, and take over if that one can't fulfill the trade in a way that this new thing can. This is what we're saying. It's competitive by nature. That's why in Bitcoin they were saying, look, we need to scale now. Like a shopkeeper or a business will not accept a medium of exchange on the premise of what it might do. It's ridiculous. You're not going to trade your time and your money and your goods and your services for a medium of exchange that might do something. It's insane. It's just like, what does it do? What value has it got? It does do this. It does scale for the world. Okay, well, I'll accept it then for my goods and services. Because if you don't, it might be worth nothing in the future. Because, like I said, it's a natural monopoly will occur.
But isn't there, like, politically, there's like let's say someone just a while ago made this point that BTC is a little bit more right-wing and Ethereum, for example, is a little bit more left-wing. And that would be that people have found more their kind of vibe within those tribes or sort of collaborations that have happened in those, because it sort of reflects more on their whole worldview on things. Let's say BTC is more Austrian economics, and especially now that sort of Ethereum and the Ethereum Classic went the way that, as far as I understand, ETH is quite a lot more centralized now, because they reverted that scam back and sort of admitted that we can take transactions back. But they found themselves there, and they still keep building and saying it's decentralized, even though it's not. But Vitalik had to come and sort of navigate in between these sort of worlds. And, it still keeps trucking along, and people have faith in that system, and they're comfortable with the trade-off. Do you think that Ethereum, for example, is just going to fade away, even though all of these new innovations and things on art especially are being built on it? Are they going to just move over, or...
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what's
maybe
going
you're
to happen.
right. Maybe you're right. I'm sorry, mate. I have to. I was going to be on another call, so I just kind of have to answer this guy. That
No,
I'm
mate,
still
it's all right. Yeah.
on this.
No, we'll tell you. Well, I mean, it's been great. I mean, we've been going for like crikey, almost 2 hours. Oh my god. Yeah, we'll just stop recording. But yeah, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure. We'll have to do this again sometime.
For sure. I'm so happy that we could have a very cool conversation, and I learned a lot from you, and I'm definitely going to have to do far more homework. I'm very grateful that you had me on your show.
Yeah, well, and also in the meantime, I mean, I'm looking to get other people on this show who are up for explaining things. So if you could recommend anybody to come on this show, I can be more than reasonable and accommodating. But the reason it's called Bitcoin Original Gangster is because we're not going to beat around the bush. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to be asking point blank questions. Yeah, there's going to be none of this like nicely, or I might not. I better not mention this because you might get upset. It's just like, no, we need answers, and that's it.
Sure. I think one of the reasons why you don't have to be like that with me is that I don't really offer resistance in a certain kind of way that you might have a real problem with. I'm sure you would have bashed my head in if I would have said something super stupid. So I think Robin DeLisser might be one who you would have a good conversation with. She's more into BSV these days. She's gone through her own evolution and thrown conferences and things like that in Miami. That might be an interesting one for you if you don't know her already.
No, I don't. I mean, yeah, just put us in contact. That would be fantastic. Yeah, I'd really like that.
Sure. I think she just came to the BSV conference here in London just a while ago. But that's not what you were asking. You were asking for more like actual, like nitty gritty conversations. You might just agree with her with the majority of the points. So I'll have a think of see who would be a good one for you. Maybe someone like Brecky, who's a Bitcoin artist and self-confessed slightly toxic maximalist. He would probably be better to offer you counterpoints on the BTC points of view that I'm unable to. So
Yeah, let's
maybe
do it.
yeah, I'd probably recommend Brecky to come on. He might be someone if he's up for it.
Great, yeah. Honestly, I'm just kind of like I had a funny chat with somebody the other day, and I thought to myself, what goal can I set myself? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to keep going until we get Anthony Pompilano and Mike Novogratz on this show 2-on-1. I'll take them both on.
Good on you, buddy. I mean, it's certainly needed by those who really understand the profound things. I'd listen to that show. I'd definitely be up for it to learning more, because sometimes from these conflicts you really get to hear really what's up, as opposed to because that fucking conference with where it was Tone and Craig and Rubini and
God, yeah.
That's still the best conference talk that I've ever
Your
heard.
shit stinks. I'm talking about the shit in your toilet.
Your shit oh, it's hilarious.
It was
Wonderful,
funny.
man. Yeah, for sure. I'll keep thinking who could be good, but Brecky would be. I thought of him a couple of times earlier already, that he would have been better to answer from his point of view certain points. So
Yeah, that's all right. Well, let's stay in contact on Twitter like we've been doing. Great fun.
for sure. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Cheers, Vesa. Thanks very much. See you later. All right.
Zeratoshi.
Bye. Bye, mate.